Well, we're back at it again. We're talking about my favorite foreign country to bring up over and over. And I wanted to differentiate this from all the other times I've spoken about it by sort of making a case, if you will. Because I think I've made it pretty clear I have a disdain for the fact that the Americans, at least a portion of them, will sit here and say, "Oh, I'm pro-life, so I support, no one being massacred because they equate abortion to murder." But then you are completely fine or turn a deaf ear to 85,000 children being bombed with your tax dollars in another region or nation. And I remember when I was talking to Jennifer, who is the main individual that I've spoken about this particular subject with. One of the things she said I thought was really telling was that when she first came on Twitter and did her campaign to get people to care, she thought, "Oh, there's no way that if people are actually informed of this, they'll, support it, because who would back a genocide?" So she goes on there and gets the complete opposite of what she was expecting. But as I thought more about what I've experienced over the last, I guess, 6 months of being active on Twitter, or more active than I had been in the last 2 years, it all adds up. We say hello to Dirk. Um, and what I mean by that is you can look at any domestic thing, right? Whether it's the 20, I think it's 27% of the homeless that are veterans, the $1 trillion student loan debt, the craziness of going to school to get a higher education to help you pay for stuff, and then you end up coming out with your legs shackled and barely being able to buy anything. It's just this whole string of it's a Ferris wheel basically. But you look at any domestic problem in the U.S. and you'll see a group of people, not always Republicans, not always conservatives, but there's always a group of people who, by virtue of you being stricken by some scenario or situation, will usually try to demean you as a way of confirming to themselves that it doesn't matter what you've experienced, or at least that it's entirely on your fault as to why that's happened. So let's go. I'll give you an example. I frequently talk about my disdain for out of wedlock childbirth, because I think that I don't think it's been proven statistically that people who are not born in a marriage are less likely to be successful and more likely to go to prison, just a bunch of things. But I would never look down on people who happen to have been born in that scenario, because the two people that preceded them chose to do something they had no control over. They are simply the byproduct of two people getting together and doing the polar opposite of what I requested or wanted. So I would not look down at the person who was afflicted by a scenario they could not control. I would be pissed at the people who, did it. And even then, that's not entirely that's subject to change as well. But going back to what I was saying, when I was thinking about the comment that was made in response to the Syria video, right, where I was talking about how Trump had said, "Oh, we're going to do Syria," and then he backflipped. There was an individual who had stated that this was the standard of derangement syndrome, TDS. I said, look, if you're going to tell me that critiquing Trump for the same thing I critiqued Obama over is derangement syndrome, when the whole point of saying that is it applies to people who hold him to a different standard than other people, you're just plain wrong. You're using that word incorrectly. But this person couldn't care less, and they decided to say that about me. And I realized that it is difficult in a lot of cases to fully accept the fact that there are many issues that started under Obama or Bush that Trump's continued. Yeah, it's extreme backflip, Dirk. But again, it makes sense because these are people who, I guess, to put it in a more concise manner, oftentimes, if someone serves in the military, you call them patriotic. Oftentimes, if someone um, is a veteran, you'll say they're patriotic because they fought in some conflict, some banana war. But if a person is a teacher, or maybe a clerk at a grocery store, if you say, hey, we should raise the wages of that person, they'll tell you, take a hike, basically. Isn't that unpatriotic to tell your fellow American you cannot make an extra dollar or it's going to destroy the economy? That $1 is going to just, and I guess I already did the debunking the minimum wage, increase is bad or whatever theory where I talked about how stupid a lot of the arguments against it are. But I always say, look, if bumping it up by $1 or $2 is so bad, why don't you just make it $1? Why don't we just make it to where you every time you work every day is just a quarter? Because they know that that's a bunch of crap. But see, the politicians don't do it because the corporations say, hey, look, uh, if it's like, for example, with Bezos, here's a guy who gets billions of dollars a year, can pay his workers probably $30 an hour if he wanted to. So it's obvious that he has the money to do that. But instead of doing that, he decides to hire his. Think how slick this is. He'll hire them part time, so he won't have to even pay them the full minimum wage. Minimum wage, which is already considered to not really be that effective at keeping someone's head above water. When you factor in, additional utilities besides mortgage, like a car, gas, electricity, water. So he'll make it even worse just so he can scrape a couple more dollars. And the reason they defend these people, Dirk, is because we as Americans raised in our little, that thing of wanting to believe in a dream, have this inherent desire to think that we can eventually become what someone else is. So, for example, if I were one of them, I would think that if I just keep doing what I'm doing, not I'm going to, but I could eventually get millions of subscribers, right? And just all kind of stuff. And look, what is so aggravating about a lot of it is when you try to explain to these people, we're not harping on the person for having billions of dollars. We're not harping on someone for having millions. We're simply stating that when you live in a society where people can buy, or rather can use their money to influence things outside of themselves, such as the wages of the people they employ, or dare I say the politicians around them, the person is corrupt. Look at the Koch brothers. I mean, we can go down the list of just people who have notoriously used their cash to influence elections. Um, so I bring that up because I try to explain a lot of times that I think if more people knew what Citizens United was, we probably wouldn't have the same level of ignorance. I mean, I've had people who've tried to tell me Trump taking 30 million from the NRA and doing nothing about all the mass shootings that we have is not. They have nothing to do with each other. That's just a coincidence. I've had people who say any particular Republican, for example, or Democrat, like Booker, when he voted against Bernie's bill that was supposed to make drug prices in the U.S. go down, so that other countries like Canada. And Booker voted against it while taking over 200,000 from the pharmaceutical companies. That's just a coincidence. So when people, basically erase the idea that someone can receive a large sum of cash and that influences them to do something, what else am I supposed to do with that person? They don't want even a chance of equal opportunity. Yeah, they don't think that it's right to just bother with attempting to look at something objectively. It's always a coincidence. Yeah, Envoy, it pretty much is. But getting back to what I was saying, when I mentioned that the main reason we're bombing Yemen, because a lot of times when I speak of anecdotal stuff, it's usually tied to some online activity. So that since I don't try to engage people politically a lot of times in person, because it feels even more frustrating. There was a person who stated something to the effect of, "Oh, we're bombing other countries so we can fight the terrorists over there." But in Yemen, we've never been bombed by them. We've never had terrorists come to us. And I try to tell them, you guys don't even realize how insane who you support is. I mean, think about this. Trump wanted a Muslim ban, right, while he was running for president, and then turns a complete blind eye to not only the human rights violations of Saudi Arabia and Yemen, but also funds it and supports them, becomes their main bootlicker. And I'm not going. And before someone who likes him loses their minds and snaps in the comments, I would say the same thing about Obama, who started this conflict without congressional approval. Yeah, well, all for money. There was a 100 billion dollar deal that took place between the U.S. and Saudi Arabia. So Trump has no kind of, and this is kind of what I try to convey to people. When you have no conviction, right? When all you do is to benefit yourself financially, bad things can ensue. Look at Obama in his first cabinet, which was picked out by Citibank. His Treasury Secretary kicked millions of people out of their houses with having early foreclosures. Look at Harris when she was Attorney General, and Trump's Treasury Secretary Mnuchin gave her, how much was that? A couple of thousands of dollars to several of her campaigns, while he, as president of the bank that he was in charge of, had early foreclosures. It comes down to the U.S. should be a world police, but their definition of police is supreme overlord. Yeah, but they're not as big as they want you to believe, because they oftentimes tell you the U.S. is a world superpower and we're so invincible and we're so great and blah blah blah. But it's like, dude, if we're so great, why are we being the little girl of, or rather the attack dog for Israel and Saudi Arabia? Look at what they're doing with Ilhan Omar right now, Dirk, um, where they're going after her for correctly stating that APAC has influenced politicians. Um, and this is why I really do hate the current style of politics, because you have these gaping issues, right? And they go on year after year, and then you're told by people to just kind of put up with it until something happens. You have to, these little stupid incrementalists I have no patience for. And I actually wanted to mention this article that came out on the 6th, on Wednesday. And it says American and British made bombs may have killed or injured nearly 1,000 civilians, including women and children, in Yemen's 4-year conflict, according to a report released Wednesday by human rights groups. The airstrikes killed 203 people and injured at least 749, the report found. At least 122 children and 56 women were among the dead and wounded. Now, if that happened here, the people would be losing their minds. They'd want to go to war with that country. They would hate the people that live there, or at least the people who are in charge. It would, and rightfully so. But they have this thing, and I guess what I find so frustrating, and I've tried to explain this before. I give a lot of people credit for not knowing things that are from eras where they didn't have phones that could go on the World Wide Web and type something in. But we're looking at people, right, my age, younger, a little bit older, who have always had access to the internet, have always been able to look this stuff up, and have always been able to be completely aware of any of these things going on, and they just don't care. And they'll back someone like Trump, right, who will continue the same bloody conflict that Obama started, and then they'll still think in their head, yeah, these two people are nothing alike. I remember I had some dumb heifer on Twitter who, when I mentioned this conflict, wrote off my comparing the two of them by saying, "Oh, they're alike. That's a good one." He. What else can you do? I always tell people, why does the U.S. go to countries to solve, in quotation marks, conflicts? And I hear, oh, because we need to liberate countries and save but why though? What's in it for America? This is perverted. And then you hear the countries on the other side, mainly the Middle Eastern countries, and they despise U.S. They say they don't need saving. So what's going on here exactly? Yeah, that's literally the regime change push for every single time we get involved anywhere. Look at what's happened in Venezuela. I did a stream about the stupidity of having regime change there, and I had a person come in and this is kind of One of the things I don't like about streams I've mentioned before is that people come in and say something weird and they hope to get you or catch you on guard or whatever. Person I've never seen before, never commented on anything at all, shows up and then gasses me up with all this red scare nonsense about how evil and horrible Maduro is and how the U.S. has to do something, blah 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 blah. They're from Brazil. I'm just like, dude, go away. What? And this is what I'm talking about. When you try to sit people down and explain to them why something is bad, they don't want to hear it. For example, if I were to tell you why I don't believe the U.S. is going to Venezuela for humanitarian purposes, I would bring up all of the oil in Venezuela, the fact that we tried to get a pipeline in the U.S. to replicate that kind of oil. Um, so that's obviously proven to be something that those at the top in the U.S. want. And I'd also state, hey, look, you can go through history. When was the last time the U.S. got involved anywhere and it became better for it? Look at Iran. I always bring up Iran. Mohammed Mossadegh, democratically elected leader, overthrown. It's like, oh my God, the election in Venezuela was rigged. Well, the U.S. going over there and bombing people to death isn't going to help. And deciding that they're going to pick a president who didn't even run. Think how, and I kept explaining, think how crazy this is. Imagine if I say, I am the leader of Canada, and Trump is no longer he's the interim president, or rather, Trump is no longer. I refuse to recognize him as the American president. Instead, we're going to say it's person that didn't run, person that didn't run. It's Ron Paul. It's the same thing. But again, when you sit these people down, you give them analogies, you try to explain something, you go through history, it just rejected. It's just like when I was defending Trump over getting out of Syria. I was attacked by actual people who have TDS because I had them telling me that the general said this, the general said that. I said, look, man, every single time the generals get involved in anything, it always fails. The generals are the same people who told Johnson we should stay in Vietnam until we win. Failed. Same ones who told Nixon we should stay over there. Failed. Same ones who told, just go down the list. Every conflict they offer their input in, we never benefit from it. What happens after oil runs out, if it does, since it derives from fossils? Dirk says, and the people in the administration are the same people that in the past placed banana republics. Yeah, but that's my point, that I keep hearing all this crap about draining the swamp and Trump is fighting the deep state, and then the people who he put in his cabinet are pricks from the Bush era. He has Bush's UN ambassador as his national security advisor. He has, Kavanaugh was appointed by Bush for that lower judgeship he had prior to being picked for the Supreme Court. You get my point. We can go down the list. He has Bush's, I don't remember what she was, Cho, the one at the transportation secretary. My point is, you can name multiple people in Trump's cabinet who were part of the same establishment that his supporters claim he's breaking up. I mean, it's like, what are you talking about? Yeah, I wish I could say that, Envoy. Dirk says they are blatantly and in our face doing the worst and repeating some worst of U.S. history. Absolutely. And I look at this conflict, right? Where you have these bombs being dropped, children, getting blown to pieces. They never heard of the U.S., never heard of Obama or Trump or any of these people. But because they happen to live in a country that Saudi Arabia has targeted as being against, that they're pissed at, rather, for their government, their friendly government being overthrown, they pay the price. But they don't just pay the price because Saudi Arabia bombs them. They pay the price also because the U.S. Is filled with a bunch of idiots who are only concerned about themselves. And look, let me clarify that. If you don't know about this, that's fine. If you do know about this and you continue to not talk about it, you continue to ignore it, you continue to vote for the people who participate in it, I have a problem with you. Do you think you would ever travel to see how things are over there by talking to them? I'm not talking about the war from the area, the tour areas. I guess I kind of have this thing about pretty much any Middle East country, I'm a little bit worried about going to. People try to talk about how great Israel is, and then they ban Chomsky from entering because they didn't like all the stuff he would say. Uh, so they're more of a totalitarian state than people would give them credit for. Oh my God, you said things we don't like. You're banned. I mean, we are too, because look what we're doing to Chelsea Manning. But that's another story. Yeah, it is risky, Dirk. I agree. You say I'd leave that to journalists. That in itself is risky. Yeah. But what's even riskier is the fact that we have literally an entire. And I've thought about just doing a whole campaign to get people aware of this. There was at one point I had a sheet, and it listed all of the I guess a play-by-play of the events, right? So Saudi's friendly government gets overthrown. Obama enters the war in March of 2015 without congressional approval, and I would say the deaths that have taken place, how Saudi Arabia is blocking the ports for food. Just go down the list how the food that's there gets price gouged so nobody can afford it. All this malnourishing. The UN's calling it the worst humanitarian crisis in modern history. There's a lot of stuff that I could mention, but if the people in mass are going to just go, oh, that they're like basically, I picture their reaction is, oh my God, that sucks, and then they just go right back to what they were doing before, and they're not doing that because they lack critical thinking skills or they're stupid. They're doing it because they don't. There's no. I guess I'd compare it to how with the new House Democrats, I really hate how it seems like with all of them, they're just kind of kowtowing and playing along with Pelosi and the rest of the pricks. Like how AOC announced, "Oh, I'm going to vote for Pelosi if she's the most progressive first." Like, heck. But they're doing that because they think if we can just survive this term, then survive another term, then survive another term, we can eventually do something that actually is, progressive or something we want to do. And with me, I just whether it's any issue I can think of, I don't think I have some infinite amount of time to just lollygag and not be serious about it. We've literally had thousands of people die from this conflict. So, how many more years do we have to bomb there before we get people to say, for the most part, stop this? Envoy said it's like someone telling you a girl in your class is the meanest in the world and you've never spoke to her. She could actually be different than your friend described. Well, yeah, but that's my point, that people don't actually do the research on any of this stuff. Again, with the Ilhan Omar crap, it's literally a bunch of people who, just like Trump and just like the Republicans calling her an anti-Semite, they don't remember what she said. They couldn't explain to you why that was bad. And if they do, they're literally regurgitating something that uh, a Republican, whether it's Trump or a member of Congress, stated. So it's not about her in particular. It's about bootlicking and always sucking the nipple of Orange Daddy and whoever the hell else is saying something that you want to affiliate yourself with by virtue of it being from that person. And I've never been that way. I oftentimes critique Bernie for being against BDS because I think it's a position he should have. All right. Dirk says with records from top to bottom, there's undeniable proof of what happened. Yeah, Envoy says because it's outrage culture, the media tells you how to feel. People are not doing their independent research from both sides. Yeah, no, look, I'm not saying that it's one side doing more than the other. What I am saying is that I wish I could get one media story where people don't just regurgitate what's told to them, because I look at a lot of this stuff and it doesn't affect me. I can read all these little stupid articles about the sexual harassment on Bernie's campaign, and it doesn't affect my view of him. It doesn't make me think that everyone who worked for him was a molester, which is the narrative they're trying to put out, because why the hell else would you debut this right before he tries to run again? Okay, Dirk says Yemen is going to be good to fix. Hopefully this year if Congress is strong, but absolutely with uh, I the DNC isn't stupid, but we don't know yet. He announced a hell of a lot earlier than you predicted, Dirk. You said it was going to be in May. Always says if two of my friends get into a fight and I listen to one side, I'm sure to sympathize with them and not the other friend. You have to do holistic research. Yeah, but people just are not interested in doing it anymore. And I really feel like I've ran out of ways to get my point across, because if I go and spread something around on a place like Twitter, right, you can get some people to watch a little bit of it. You can get some people to check out some of it. But who among that group, right, of those thousands of views, hundreds of views, whatever number it would ultimately get to before I just say screw it, who among those people is going to watch something and go, wow, my mind has been changed based on the evidence that was presented in front of me? And I think that's one of the things I like to feel the most comforted about with myself, that oftentimes when I think of my positions in the past, they have been influenced by an influx of new information. I didn't have a negative opinion of Obama until I found out about all of the, I bring it on the list, keeping the Patriot Act basically in place, um, not doing single payer, passing a right wing healthcare plan. This, you know, all bad enough it's a humanitarian crisis, but then also it's not even approved by Congress. So like all those people who tell you about Nixon was a whatever, it's the same thing. Like remember, and I'm saying that as someone that actually is I think it's funny, a lot of people are surprised by my kind of decent opinion of Nixon, but think about it, the Nixon quote where he said, uh, if the president commits a crime, it's not a crime, or something to that effect. That's literally what the US is encouraging, that when you are in the Oval Office you can order a war without getting it approved by Congress, and perfectly fine. Always says, what do you think of social media's influence on politics now and how people's views are shaped, especially Twitter? I don't know, because again, I've never seen anything on Twitter. Like, I've never seen something written by a random person that just made me go, oh my God, I have to change my whole way of thinking completely. Now, if somebody gets in front of a podium and starts giving a speech about, hey, look, this is why I think this is a problem. Look at these numbers, blah, 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 blah. Okay, fine. Those have actually been more effective. But when they're just sitting there typing something on the keyboard, I'm a lot more likely to tune it out. Because like you gotta understand, on places like Twitter, and really, I guess to an extent YouTube, but most especially in the live chat, it always comes off because there's a limited number of characters as something that the person does not fully mean, because they're not able to fully express themselves by virtue of the site's self-imposed limitations. What I mean by that is, if I do a stream, right, which I can do these for 8 hours, I can talk for as long as I feel I need to until I cut it off and then go to something else. When people are on places like Twitter, they have to pack their argument against somebody else into 3 or 4 sentences, where if they were on somewhere else like Facebook, they would have typed maybe 2 or 3 paragraphs. So, that's kind of my thing, that every time I go on there, I can't take them seriously. I think I said before, Twitter, in my opinion, is the weakest social media website, but we can go into that later. All right, let me see what's going on. All right, I think I've covered it. So I appreciate you guys for paying attention to this conflict. I wish it would end, but people just don't care. And you guys are talking about the resolution and getting out of this war. The only way we're ever going to get a change is if a majority of people say, I am sick of bombing random people who have done nothing to us, and then being expected by my local politician to not care because it's not happening to me. I can't wait for the stream either. I don't think so, on, but again, that's why I say the US is going to hell and we live in the twilight zone. So I thank you, and I thank Dirk, and I thank the other 2 people that stuck around. Have a good night.